So here we are, halfway through November of 2020. A lot has happened this year: virus outbreak, economic collapse, protests and riots, a very intense presidential election, WAP, and something about killer hornets. Quite frankly, I knew this year was going to be jank when Neil Peart died in January, but if you're watching this video, you managed to survive long enough to see the 9th generation of video game consoles. That's right, Microsoft's Xbox Series X, Sony's PlayStation 5, and Nintendo's Game & Watch have officially released, kicking off the next generation of gaming. What's that? You're broke like me? Couldn't secure your PS5 or Xbox Series X? You can't even afford games for your Switch? Don't worry, I get it. Like most of you, my 2020 has not been so kind. I was out of a job for about 5 months and money got real tight. While I'm watching my Facebook and Twitter timelines get flooded with people and their shiny new systems, I'm staring at my Switch like, you know what? Now's a good time to go through my backlog, which is quite daunting if I'm being perfectly honest. However, instead of making a video about the long-ass list of games I haven't beat yet, I decided to fully lean into the broke life and try out each and every one of the free-to-play games that are currently available on the Nintendo Switch. So please, let me take you down this rabbit hole and I'll let you know which ones are worth taking up precious storage space and which ones should be avoided like the Rona. Now let's go ahead and dive into the first free-to-play category I'm going to cover: pinball games. I'll be quite honest, I didn't even think this would need to be a category. I mean, how different could pinball games be, right? Pinball's pinball, isn't it? If you're going into this video thinking that all pinball games are created equal, you'd be just as wrong as I was before I started playing each one of these games. Sure, at the core they're the same, have some free pinball machines with the rest being ones you pay for, and yeah, they all play pinball, but the UI aesthetics, camera angles, and overall feel of the games are surprisingly different. I'll start us off with Sicaria Pinball, which in my experience is the worst one of the bunch. Right out the gate, the menus and the UI are just very bland and boring. I mean, that's not a deal breaker by any means, but then we start playing and the actual pinball machine is just so tiny. Like, you can see here how much of the screen space a pinball machine takes up, and on smaller screens, this is a lot harder to keep track of. This machine I'm playing on happened to be the only free pinball machine at the time of recording, and I mean, look at it. It's got nothing going on. There's like 3 or 4 different things for your pinball to hit and rack up points on. On top of that, the game kept bombarding me with messages like this to try to get me to spend money. Obviously, other pinball games want you to pay for more machines too, but this one in particular is very in your face about it, and definitely not worth the 953 megabytes of storage. So yeah, don't even bother with Sicaria Pinball. Next on our list, we'll be looking at Stern Pinball Arcade, coming in at 1.6 gigabytes. This one isn't quite as bad as Sicaria Pinball, but I can't recommend it either. The viewing angle is on the low side, and the camera has to dart around to follow the pinball quite a bit because of that, and I can't quite explain it, but the feel of it mechanically is just slightly off. I don't know, it's not something I can quite put into words here, but I'm sure if you're some sort of like pinball enthusiast, you'll know what I'm talking about. I can't be alone here, because after my first game, I got a pretty abysmal score and somehow made 5th place in the leaderboards. If that ain't a clear-cut sign that no one plays this game, I don't know what is. And now I can finally talk about the good stuff. What you're seeing on screen is Pinball FX3, taking up the least amount of storage at 547 megabytes and has the most unique vibe of the pinball games on the Switch. It's far more animated and video game-like with its approach, as you can see with the way some of the things like that tree and the zombie dude move within the machine. You can also see it with the points and notifications that appear on screen, which are things I didn't even think I would appreciate from a pinball game. I also think the camera angle is set just right, allowing you to view the entire machine pretty clearly, and due to the visual effects that they chose, you rarely lose track of the ball. Again, this isn't quite that, realistic with the approach that they took, but I found myself having fun with this one. The UI and menus also look pretty good, so Pinball FX3, it definitely gets a good recommendation from me. And last but not least, we have Pinball Arcade, taking up a questionable 3 gigabytes of storage space. Now, at first glance, you might be thinking, but wait, Takun, isn't this Stern Pinball Arcade? You're playing on the same Frankenstein pinball machine. Well, dear viewer, you're not quite wrong. I'm not sure why Pinball Arcade and Stern Pinball Arcade have the same free pinball machine in addition to having very similar names, but there's definitely differences between the two games that I feel stand out a bit more since I played them on the same pinball machine. What are the differences, you ask? Well, I'm not quite sure. Pinball Arcade has notifications and a better presentation, but there's also just something about this game that feels better to play. I can't quite quantify it, I can't quite lay my finger on it, but Pinball Arcade just feels like the best realistic pinball game of the bunch. And it's not just in my mind, because this was the first pinball game I tried on the Switch, and I got a higher score on the same machine than I did in Stern Pinball Arcade. I also got 5th place on the leaderboards for some reason. I guess no one really plays pinball? Wait a minute. If no one plays pinball, then that means no one's watching this video.